The moment I stepped into that boardroom, I could feel it in the air, a tension so thick it was suffocating. After weeks of pouring my soul into a product line that could redefine our company, I was expecting accolades. Instead, my wife, Laura, and her sister, Jessica, didn't offer congratulations. They fired me. My mind raced. How could they do this to me? How could they do this to us? For years, I thought I knew everything about the company, about my wife, about the future we were building, but I was wrong. And now, they had made a mistake that would haunt them. For the last 8 years, the Vanguard Group had been my world. It wasn't just a career. It was my life's work. Laura, my wife, and Jessica, who inherited the company from their father, had always been my partners in this journey. But that day, everything shattered. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. And as I stood there, heart pounding, I realized that this was no longer just about business. This was about my future. And they had just underestimated me in the worst possible way. The conference room was eerily quiet when I entered. The papers in my hand felt heavier than usual, but I was confident. I had worked tirelessly to develop the product proposal, and I expected to receive their approval. But when I looked at Laura, her face was unreadable. Jessica was already smirking, like she had already won. I thought it was just a misunderstanding. How could they fire me after everything I had done? "Tom, you're fired," Jessica said, her voice cold and detached. The words hit me harder than I expected. Fired? From the company I had built with my own hands? I glanced at Laura, hoping for a sign, a gesture of support. But she didn't even look at me. She stared at the table, her fingers tapping nervously. I stood there in shock as Jessica continued, "We need people who can keep up with the company's direction. You are no longer needed." I had given everything to them. Long nights, difficult decisions, sacrifice. But none of it mattered. My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening. They had just kicked me out like I was nothing. I walked out of the boardroom, my mind spinning. The world around me felt like it was collapsing. The drive home was a blur. I tried to focus on the road, but my hands gripped the wheel too tightly, my thoughts drowning out everything else. When I stepped into the house, it felt like a stranger's home. The silence was deafening. How could Laura do this? After all we had been through, after everything I had sacrificed for her family, for her company, she had turned her back on me. It felt like a betrayal, a sharp cut that I couldn't fix. Sitting on the couch, I stared at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Frank, the head of HR. He texted me, "Check your contract. They made a mistake. You might still have a way out." I frowned. My contract? I had signed it years ago, back when Laura's father, Daniel, was still in charge. What was Frank talking about? I quickly grabbed my phone and texted Frank back. "What's in the contract?" His response was quick. "Look for the merger clause. It's a game changer. You're still co-chairman of the subsidiary." They didn't read the fine print. Co-chairman? Subsidiary? I had no idea what he was talking about. I hadn't thought about the contract in years, but something inside me told me to look. Maybe Frank was onto something. I spent the next few hours digging through old files in my office. The company had grown rapidly after the merger with a tech company 5 years ago. I'd been heavily involved in the deal, working out the legalities and negotiating terms with Raphael, Laura's father. As I sifted through the dusty files, I came across a folder labeled Vanguard Merger 2020. I pulled it out, opened it, and started skimming through the pages. And then, there it was, on page 17, a clause buried deep in the contract. I was listed as co-chairman of the subsidiary, which controlled the intellectual property of the entire company. My signature was required for any major business deal. Without me, they couldn't do anything. They had fired me, but they had no idea they had just handed me the keys to the company. A smile crept across my face as I leaned back in my chair. They had made a huge mistake, and now I had the upper hand. The betrayal had stung, but now I was in control. I quickly texted Frank. "Found it. What do I do now?" His reply came almost instantly. "Sit tight. Let them figure it out." The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Daniel, Laura's father. His voice was loud and furious. "Tom, why the hell did they fire you? Don't they know the merger terms? They can't just throw you out like this." My stomach dropped. Daniel didn't know. He had not been in that boardroom. He didn't know how cold and ruthless Laura and Jessica had been. I had been discarded like an employee, a tool they could just replace. But now I realized they had no idea what they had done. I kept my voice steady. "You'll have to ask them," I said, trying to hide the anger bubbling inside me. But Daniel's panic was evident. "They haven't read the contract, have they?" he asked. I paused for a moment before responding. "I don't think they have." It was then that I understood just how much trouble they were in. They thought they had cut me loose, but in reality, they had trapped themselves. As I sat alone in my house, I realized the full extent of what had just happened. The contract, the subsidiary, the intellectual property, it was all mine. They could not move forward with the company without me. Without my signature, they couldn't make any business deals. They couldn't access the bank accounts. They couldn't even sign licensing agreements. They had no power without me, and they didn't even know it yet. Marco, my lawyer, texted me again. "They're freaking out. They just called in a lawyer from New York. They're trying to figure out how to get around the contract, but they can't." I smirked. They were starting to realize their mistake, but it was too late now. I had the power, and I wasn't going to let go of it. Later that day, I received a text from Laura. Her message was careful, as if she had rehearsed it. "Tom, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand." "Out of hand?" I muttered under my breath. How could she say that after firing me in front of everyone? She hadn't even stood up for me. I did not reply to her text. Instead, I sat back, thinking about what would happen next. Soon enough, they would realize the full scope of their mistake, and when they did, they would come crawling back. But I would not be so easy to manipulate this time. I had the upper hand, and I intended to keep it. My phone buzzed once more. This time, it was Jessica. "We need your signature. Without it, the company is dead in the water." I stared at the message. The company was finished without me, and they had no idea how badly they had underestimated me